right, welcome back. Part 4 of our Fahrenheit 451 section. And sorry for the changing in camera. I'm trying to find a really good angle to shoot where it doesn't look like my beard's super crazy, but it's kind of hard right now. I apologize. Can't really get anything done with it since we're stuck at home. So apologize for the borderline homeless look or full-on homeless look. So we're going to pick up with the most important part in this book, in my opinion. This is my favorite part. I told you guys way back in part 1 that this is my favorite chapter in the book. There's only 3, but this is my favorite, and it's because of this part. I could spend days talking about individual paragraphs in this section. I feel like Bradbury really nails what he's trying to do in this section because there are so many. If you're trying to figure out what Bradbury was thinking when he wrote this, so many clues are in this section, all right? So let's just jump right in because even though it's not as many pages as the last one, it's definitely got more content. All right, first off, just another descriptive passage. It's got one of the grossest descriptions I've ever seen, to be honest with you. It's of Mildred, which this is definitely fitting for her. He says that she has brittle straw. I'm talking about her hair. Her hair's been, let me back up a little. He felt her there. He saw her without opening his eyes. Her hair burnt by chemicals to a brittle straw. Her eyes with a kind of cataract, unseen but suspect far behind the pupils. The red and pouting lips. Sorry. The body as thin as a praying mantis from dieting, and her flesh like white bacon. Now, everything was fine up until the white bacon. That's just such a horrible image for what someone's flesh looks like, but it works. Guys, you can really think about how that would work and think about, I can see where they would make that description. It's not a pretty description by any stretch, but the goal with good imagery is to not use the same old boring stuff. He says red pouting lips. That's pretty plain. That's not a great one. But then she's thin like a praying mantis with skin like white bacon. That's definitely, you won't see that in another book probably unless someone's deliberately copying Bradbury. All right. But in this scene, and really we're on one whole big scene right here. We're not going to switch through a lot of things. This is the climax of this chapter for sure. Montag is sick. I don't want to say he's sick as in like he's caught something. He's sick because his mind has made him sick, and he's debating calling into work right now. He doesn't think he can go back. He's like, I could never do what we did again yesterday. And so he wants to do what most people would do. He wants to talk about it with his spouse. But she seems completely uninterested. Remember what we talked about in the last video? She's that selfish. She is the most selfish person I think you can see in most books we would read. Let's read a little bit of their interaction. Montag says, will you bring me aspirin and water? She says, you've got to get up. She said, it's noon. You slept 5 hours later than usual. Will you turn the parlor off? Now, guys, we haven't talked about this. The parlor is what they call their living room, the TVs, okay? So will you turn the parlor off, he asked. Well, that's my family. Will you turn it off for a sick man? I'll turn it down. She went out of the room and did nothing to the parlor and came back. Is that better? Thanks. That's my favorite program, she said. Look at that. Look, she said, I don't want to turn them down. They're my family. Montag is literally her family. But she's like, I can't. She does that thing that a lot of you probably do with your parents where they come in. Now, of course, most of you now probably listen to your music on headphones. But I remember growing up and having a big stereo system. My mom come in and ask me to turn it down and me saying, yes, ma'am, and going and pretending like I was turning it down, but I didn't touch it. I mean, if I was feeling particularly brave that day, I might have actually turned it up. And, that always ended badly. Notice she goes to talking about her TV. She's not at all concerned about the fact that her husband, who she points out later is never sick, is all of a sudden sick. He says, what about the aspirin? You've never been sick before. She went away again. Well, I'm sick now. I'm not going to work tonight. Call Beatty for me. You acted funny last night, she returned, humming. Where's the aspirin? He glanced at the water glass she handed him. Oh, she walked to the bath again. Did something happen? A fire's all. So notice how she can't even remember to bring him what he asked for 2 things, aspirin and water. I mean, my middle school kid can remember 2 things, and she can't. Again, this, guys, is a byproduct of lack of critical thinking. I mean, the less and less we think, it's like with muscles. The less your brain's not a muscle, I understand that, but the less and less you use your muscles, the weaker they get, and the less, like right now, if I ran track in high school. If I tried to go out and run to the mailbox right now, I'd probably die. It's because I haven't used those muscles. So she doesn't use her brain for anything. She asks if something happened, and then he says a fire. She says, I had a nice evening, she said in the bathroom. Doing what? The parlor. What was on? Programs. What programs? Some of the best ever. Who? Oh, the bunch. And look at the conversation with her. This would aggravate me if my wife responded to everything in one word answers. By the way, he just told her there was a fire, and she just was like, "Well, I watch TV." I mean, what a terrible thing. It's like during the summer, my wife comes home from her day at work at the hospital, and she comes in, and I ask her about her day. I don't interrupt to let her know that I did lesson plans or watched Netflix for 5 hours. That's not that she doesn't care, and that definitely falls way below what she does. All right. Now, way back in video one, Montag talked about kerosene being perfume to him and never washing it off. I told you there was going to be payoff to that. Well, here it is. It says, yes, the bunch, the bunch, the bunch. He pressed at the pain in his eyes, and suddenly the odor of kerosene made him vomit. Okay, so it's not perfume anymore. In fact, it's vomit inducing, and he literally does vomit. Mildred comes in and gets really upset that he threw up on the carpet. Not upset that, are you okay? What's going on? It's, oh no, now I have to wash the carpet. Montag says, we burned an old woman with her books. And Mildred's response is, it's a good thing the rug's washable. She fetched a mop and worked on it. I went to Helen's last night. The guy says literally we lit a lady on fire, and her response is to talk more about her TVs. Most people, when we read this out loud, this is the part where they really hate Mildred. And there's more to come, guys. She's not done. So Montag continuously presses, do you not want to know more about this? And Mildred's like, I just don't care. She's completely disinterested until this happens. Montag says, Mildred, how would it be if, well, maybe I quit my job a while? You want to give up everything after all these years of working because one night some woman in her books, you should have seen her, Millie. She's nothing to me. She should have had books. It was her responsibility. She should have thought of that. I hate her. She's got you going, and next thing you know, we'll be out. No house, no job, nothing. I mean, wow, what a response. Montag is obviously troubled, and he's like, do you think maybe I could quit and do something else? And she's like, not listening to that because it would involve a disruption of her life, and she doesn't want any part of that. And now all of a sudden she cares, but look at the wording. I hate this person. I hate this. It's all about what she wants, okay? Now, Montag gets into this is where we really start to steer into some of the Bradbury making his points through the character of Montag, okay? He says, there must be something in books we can't imagine to make a woman stay in a burning house. There must be something there. You don't stay for nothing. I mean, it's clicking for him. He's like, it should have clicked earlier, to be honest. They've been burning houses for years, and why would people keep doing that unless there was something there, all right? So, but it's amazing how much if we don't use our critical thinking, we just let things go right over our head that shouldn't. And Montag's not doing that anymore. Now, Mildred's response is she's simple-minded. Obviously, the woman's stupid, and Montag points out she's as rational as you and I, more so perhaps. That she's not crazy. And once you realize that she's not crazy, that changes everything, okay? It's easy to blow off things as that person's crazy. When you have to really look at their not, that's an issue, all right? Now, going on, Montag gets into a discussion about realizing that he's been burning up all these books that, were things that people poured a ton of effort and work into. They took all this in their head and put it down on paper and wanted to share it with the world, and he comes in and burns it. Like, he's like, I'm destructive. I'm not being constructive. And then Mildred gets upset, and guys, this is one of the parts that I think is really like we could spend I could spend 10 minutes going. I'm not going to. Don't panic. Mildred says, "Let me alone. I didn't do anything." And Montag's response is, "Let you alone? That's all very well, but how can I leave myself alone? We need not to be let alone. We need to be really bothered once in a while." That concept that we shouldn't be all. It can't all be positive and happy. You have to be bothered by things because that's the only time we change them is when something upsets you. When bad things happen, they're the things that are the impetus that spur us to change. And, it'd be nice if we could change because of good things, but we don't. When things are good, we keep doing the same thing because we want them to stay good. But when bad things happen, when stuff interrupts your regular life, that's when we can, you should see change. Now, some people take it the wrong way, but the way they should is to make a change. And Montag's like, we need to be bothered. If we're always happy and there's never any issues, we will never change. And then he makes a mistake. He says, how long is it since you were really bothered about something important, about something real? Now, not a good thing to say to someone who tried to kill themselves probably just nights before or weeks before, all right? I mean, we know that Mildred has been very bothered. She's just not dealing with it because, she doesn't want to. And at that point, Saved by the Bell, Beatty pulls up out front. And now we're going to get into, there's not a page break here, but there really should be when Beatty comes in. Now we're going to get into a whole different part of the book. And this is going to be your big Beatty section where Beatty tries to explain a lot of things. And we're actually going to stop in the middle of it. So don't panic. We're going to get all of it. We're going to get to catch the rest of it in the next video. But there's so much he talks about that's of value. So Beatty walks in the door and he says, shut the relatives up, talking about the parlor. This time Mildred jumps. She immediately goes and shuts it down, indicating the kind of intimidating presence that Beatty has. So Beatty's got caught on to what's going on with Montag. He knows. He knows something's up. And he points out, he says, hey, every fireman sooner or later hits this. They only need to understand and to know how the wheels run, need to know the history of our profession. So he points out, he's like, look, this happens to everybody once in a while. I'm going to give you a little bit more insight into what's going on, and then maybe that'll make sense. So he points out that the history books that they've been using say that their profession began with Benjamin Franklin, of all people, was the first fireman who burned English books. But he points out actually it happened in the Civil War. And he says, and what caused this? And this is where, now this is alternative. This isn't actually what happened, because obviously our firemen today are noble people who put fires out. But this is still truthful in some ways. He says that everything started working for them once you moved away from words on a page to images. You got photographs. You started to get radio, which is words, but they're not on the page. They're listened to. Television. And he says things began to have mass. And he says because they had mass, they became simpler. So reading a book involves the way it should. And the reason a lot of you struggle is you don't make use of this. You read a book like you listen to a podcast or like you watch a TV. It's a very passive experience for you. Reading a book is supposed to be an active experience. You have to supply stuff. You have to think about things. And yes, podcasts and TV shows can do the same thing, but for the most part, they don't. So he's like, when things got that way, they got simpler. You didn't have to think anymore. They told you what you needed to know. Excuse me, a TV show lets me see the images that I need to. I don't have to think about them myself. And my mind, reacts differently to those than it does to just words on a page where I have to supply a lot of other stuff. Beatty points out, and this is one of the things he really hammers home, which is important for us today. He says, once books appealed to a few people here, there, everywhere. They could afford to be different. The world was roomy, but then the world got full of eyes and elbows and mouths, double, triple, quadruple population, films and radios, magazines, books leveled down to a sort of paste-pudding norm. Do you follow me? He says, once upon a time it was okay. We'll see how you use once upon a time. Once upon a time it was okay for people to be different. But now there's so many people, all the differences cause strife, and so we have to find a way to remove the differences. This is the point he's making. He's wrong, okay? But the thing about Beatty is, even though he says things that I think are wrong, he's technically not, all right? If you could find a way to remove all the differences and we could just, get to living our lives and not focusing on those things should be better. They're not. Beatty's right, but his execution's wrong. Okay, and that's the problem with him. They're trying to force people to be a way that they're just not going to be. Okay, all right. Continuing on, Beatty starts talking about, and guys, I will tell you a little bit of study as I've done, because I've studied this book. I've taught it for 15 years, and I've studied a lot about it, read tons of articles. The thing that started Bradbury to write this was he started seeing abridged versions of books. And Bradbury was a library hound. He spent all of his time in libraries. And especially in formative years, he spent a lot of time there when his family couldn't afford college, so he taught himself in a library. So he got concerned that people were taking books and abridging them and cutting out things. Think about the Count of Monte Cristo that some of you read over the summer. That actual book is exceptionally long. And there are multiple abridged versions. They keep cutting it down. The abridged version most of you read actually cuts out some characters and some plot lines. And the point that Bradbury starts to see is the more you cut it down, the more you're taking the thought out, just giving the plot. And one of the things you've learned, hopefully, in my class is that plot's important for conveying theme in literature. The plot's not the primary thing. It really should be about the lessons. Otherwise, it's entertainment literature, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what I teach. So let's look at this section. It says classics cut to fit 15-minute radio shows, then cut again to fill a 2-minute book column, winding up at last as a 10 or 12-line dictionary resume. How do you do that? How do you take a book as complex as the Count of Monte Cristo and turn it into a 2-minute review or a 10 to 12-line dictionary resume, just about a Wikipedia entry? Now Wikipedia entries sometimes can be quite extensive, but let's just say a basic one. You tell what happened, you take all of the depth out though. And this is what Bradbury saw happening, and he didn't like that. All right. And tomorrow, no, not tomorrow, in the next video, we're going to see why they did this. Okay. That doesn't show up here. It's going to come back. All right. Well, actually, it is in this paragraph. Let me give you this. He says, I exaggerate, of course. The dictionaries were for reference, but many were those whose sole knowledge of Hamlet, as I say, of Hamlet, was a one-page digest in a book that claimed, now at last you can read all the classics. Keep up with your neighbors. Now, there's going to be more about that later. That's what I didn't think that was here. But he says the importance of this is so that you don't feel stupid. I mean, heaven forbid, Mr. Morse is in class going on and on about Hamlet, and you don't understand what he means. So you just look it up on your phone and get the plot real quick, and you know what happened. Except you know what happened. You don't know the importance of it. You just know what happened. And that's not the thing. And they're only doing it so that they don't sound stupid, and they're worried about that other people don't think they're better than them, and that's wrong. Okay, I mean, if you want to be better than, it's like cheating on a test or cheating in sports because you don't want to feel bad about yourself. Well, get better. If you don't like where you are, that's what you should be doing, is improving, not trying to dumb things down so that oh, I'm just as smart as you now, but you're not. Okay, so going on. He points out this one up, man. This one has changed since I started teaching it 15 years ago. In the next little part, he says, turning stories into one column, 2 sentences, a headline. Then in midair, all vanishes. Whirl man's mind around about so fast under the pumping hands of publishers, exploiters, and broadcasters that the centrifuge flings off all unnecessary time-wasting thought. Bradbury didn't see the internet coming. I mean, he saw it. He lived to see it. But, man, this is what it does. I cannot tell you how many times people come up to me and say, hey, Mr. Morris, did you hear about? And they will tell me a headline from a story that they didn't even read. All right? And you have got to stop that. That is just pure nonsense. You'll read 75 headlines as you scroll through a news thing and never read any of them. And this is what's happening. It says your whole knowledge of that story is that one sentence headline, if it's even a full sentence. Okay, and that's all you know of it. And you go around like you know everything because you read that one sentence. That is wrong, and that is why our country is filled with ignorant people who think they're very intelligent, all right? Then he talks about there being so much information thrown at you that you quit thinking about it. You just move on to the next one, reading about this coronavirus business, all I see is, we have a vaccine that'll be ready in months. We have a vaccine that'll be ready in 2 years. You see, this is going to go on at least until the summer. You see, this is going to go on for 18 months. You see all these different things, and it's like, you just, depending on what kind of person you are. If you're a positive person, you skew towards the good news. If you're negative, you skew towards the right. And then you get in a fight about it with somebody who's on the opposite side, and neither of you knows what you're talking about because all you've done is read headlines. And that is just beyond ridiculous. And it's probably one of the reasons I no longer do social media. I can't deal with it. I can't deal with the stupidity, and I can't deal with the ignorance. All right. But Beatty's like, hey, this is a good thing because we can get everybody to think the same thing, which, okay, he's not totally wrong. But is that what we want? Okay. Now, this next one hurts me. He talks about school. Again, this is something that Bradbury predicted that is definitely true. He says school is shortened. This is Beatty talking again. School is shortened, discipline relaxed, philosophies, histories, languages dropped, English and spelling gradually neglected, finally almost completely ignored. Life is immediate. The job counts. Pleasure lies all about after work. Why learn anything save pressing buttons, pulling switches, fitting nuts and bolts? Look what he says about school. It's short. Well, school's longer now than it was, Mr. Morse. Yeah, but it's not. I mean, yeah, time-wise, maybe. I remember having more time in the summer than you guys do. But our time in school itself is not the actual on-task time is not what it should be. I mean, we have a lot of electives. We have a lot of wasted time. And not because the teachers are bad teachers. It's just that's the way it goes. Discipline relaxed. Oh, goodness. One of the things from teaching public school, I saw that. And it's even worse here in Mobile County. I have heard horror stories all over the country, but I've heard a lot from here about, kids cussing teachers out and that them being told there's nothing that the school can do about it. Kids being violent towards teachers, but being told, hey, I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it. I mean, that never would have happened when I was growing up and when my mom was growing up, never. And my grandparents, goodness, no. All right. He talks about philosophies. We don't even have philosophy classes. You have an apologetics class, which is a philosophy class, and most of you complain about how hard it is. Histories and languages dropped. We have, I mean, our school offers Spanish. I know some of the public schools offer a little more, but for the most part, very little language is offered. And histories. We have history. Yeah, you have the required history classes. There's not a lot of other stuff. Um, Says finally, almost all. He talks about spelling and grammar being ignored, uh, and that for sure. I'm an English teacher, and I ignore a lot of the mistakes you guys make. And then he points out, and this comes down to what I hear you saying all the time. He says, "Why learn anything about what applies to your job?" So I get to hear stuff like, "I'm not going to be a chemist. Why do I have to learn this? I don't want to be an English teacher. Why do I have to write a paper?" Because there's skills that build critical thinking. It's not about just what you do. High school and college are not just job training facilities for you personally. They're there to make you a better person. They're there to make you a more well-rounded person, to make you a person who can think, a person who can be a productive citizen. All right. It's nice to have those other elements, and hopefully, you can find that. But if you want that, go to a vocational school, which there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Go learn to be a welder or a carpenter. But college isn't just for that. All right. That's why you have all the other stuff. And yes, you can get into some big conspiracy theory about no, it's so schools can make more money, blah, blah, blah. You can do that, all right? And there's some truth to it, I'm sure. But colleges were intended originally to build good citizens, and that's the goal here. It's not just about what you need. It's not go to work, then go home and have fun, go to work, go home and have fun. There should be more. There should be. There's not, but there should be, all right? The whole time this conversation's going on, Mildred is pretending to clean up. She's, patting things around Montag's the bed he's laying in, and she's patting around his pillow. Now, if you read like you were supposed to, we know that Montag has a book hidden behind his pillow, the one he took from the fire the night before. And he wants no part of Mildred finding it because he knows what she's going to do. All right. He keeps telling her, get away, get away. And then it comes to this part. He says, for God's sake, let me be, he cried Montag passionately. Beatty opened his eyes. Mildred's hands had frozen behind the pillow. Her fingers were tracing the book's outline, and the shape became familiar. Her face looked surprised and then stunned, her mouth open to ask a question. This crazy woman is about to ask him about that book. She's not going to just be like, oh, let's keep it secret, let's get out of here. She is about to say something. Well, Montag basically kicks her out, all right? But there's one last little part before we're going to stop where Beatty talks about sports. All right, and please don't be offended. This is not one of the stronger parts. He asks Montag about a bunch of different sports that he likes. He says, more sports for everyone. Group spirit, fun, and you don't have to think, eh? Excuse me, organize and organize. Sorry. And super organized, super sports. More cartoons and books, more pictures. The mind drinks less and less. Impatience. Highways full of crowds going somewhere, nowhere. The gasoline refugee. Towns turning into motels, people into nomadic surges from place to place, following the moon tides, living tonight in the room where you slept this noon and I the night before. So it's not that he's insulting sports there. It's more about, he's saying that if you have more of that, less thought is required. And I want to point out there is a lot of thinking involved in sports, okay? As someone who's coached in the past, would like to do it again at some point, you do have to think. Good athletes and good coaches think a lot, but it's a different type of thinking. It's like I said in the last video, it's situational. This is not situational. He's talking about being able to think in general. Then he has one of my favorite, it's a fragment, but I love it. The gasoline refugee. That is such a cool line. If I still was doing music, that might be my band name that I would want to start. My folk rock band, the Gasoline Refugees. But I mean, the concept there is that, we're so busy moving, we don't want to sit still. Sitting still is rough on people. There are a lot of you right now who are quarantined at home, sitting there, and it has been a week, and you're going nuts. It's not even been a full week, guys. We were at school Monday. It's been Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and today is Sunday when I'm making these videos. So 5 days and starting the 6th, and some of you are already going nuts. Some of you have decided, forget it, I'm not going to quarantine. I'm going to go to the beach, or I'm going to go other places, and, bad idea, but whatever. So we don't like being still. We don't like having to think. So that's the thing I want you to take away as we move out of this section, is the importance of just taking time to not be doing stuff. And I don't mean being lazy and just sitting there staring at the wall. I mean allowing your brain to work, allowing yourself to reflect and think about things, because when we do that, we often think about the things we need to change, the things we're doing that we don't particularly like, and that's what we should do. That's when we start thinking about our happiness. Are we happy or are we not? All right. Okay, guys, for such a short section of the book, we sure did take up a lot of time. So I'm going to stop here, regroup, and then do the last part of chapter 1, all right?